Well, good morning everyone and welcome to another podcast. Today I am out at Barlow Trout Fisheries in North Derbyshire. It's in a beautiful valley, it's wooded on all sides, and there's a series of small trout pools that's fed from a brook that runs through the fishery, and the water from the brook runs into the first pool, and then the second, and then the third, and it kind of cascades down the valley as it were through gravity, and then it's reintroduced to the brook at the bottom. And these little trout pools are great for people who want to keep fly fishing through the winter months for trout. If you've not got access to any grayling fishing, or you're not interested in grayling fishing on the rivers, then this gives you an opportunity to come out and fish and keep fly fishing through the winter. And they tend to fish very well through the winter, whereas the big reservoirs, they all close anyway, more or less, and shut down over the winter for maintenance and boat repairs and repainting. And to be honest, through the cold weather, those big reservoirs, they don't fish brilliantly. The fish tend to disappear. Whereas these smaller trout pools, plenty of midges, they're not too deep, and I can see there's a fish leaping right in the middle of the pool right in front of me. And I'm out today to do some winter stillwater fly fishing and going over one of my favourite winter fly fishing methods for these small stillwaters. The tactic I'm going to be using today is to fish a very static fly. When the water cools down, the fish's metabolism slows down, they're less active, less wanting to chase their food. So often they're wanting quite a still fly. And much of the food you're going to find that the fish are feeding on at this time of year are going to be midges. It's the main staple really of hatching flies through the winter. And what I'm going to do is actually use a brand new fly, something we've designed. It's a prototype, and I'm going to fish a duo, so that the one on the surface is a big foam fly, which is an indicator midge pattern, and it's got a big yellow tuft of foam at the top, and then a small emerging midge type pattern underneath. But the key thing with this fly is it has a little ring at the rear of the hook, and that allows me to easily attach a dropper. And I've got a dropper of about 2 feet, and then on the end of the dropper I have a dowel back, which is a very common Welsh fly, a great little midge imitation, and works well on this pool. And the idea here is that the indicator midge fly at the surface will almost act like a float, really, an indicator. And if that disappears, it means that a fly has taken the dowel back that's hanging underneath, or there's a good chance of getting a rise to the midge pattern on the surface itself. And actually looking out across the water, I can see there's 2 or 3 fish splashing about, rising, coming up and feeding. The setup I've got today, I've got a 10-foot 5-weight rod with a weight forward line. I've got around 6 to 8 feet of 5-pound straight through leader tied on the end of the line. Then I've got my indicator midge pattern, and then I've got about 2 feet of dropper tied on the end of there with the dowel back on. So I'm going to get cracking, get some cast out, and the tactic here really is to cast out and just let the flies drift in the water. I'm not going to put any retrieve in, I'm not going to be stripping back, I'm going to let them fish very slowly. And this dowel back pattern, which is hanging 2 feet under the indicator fly, will just drift very static through the water, and hopefully will look like a midge pupa, which is the underwater stage of the midge before it hatches out into the adult midge. Right, let's give this a crack. It's a day ticket water here, anyone can come and fish. Turn up and fish on the bank, and someone will be round to collect your money. Right, my first cast I'm putting in, just going to put out about maybe 20 feet of line, not too far, and I can see the yellow foam of the indicator midge pattern. Like I said, no retrieve at all. I'm just going to let it work and sit, and hopefully one of these fish that are slowly cruising through this cooler water, sipping on midges, will see the dowel back and make good. All you really need to do is gather the line as it kinks naturally on the water. It is a beautiful little valley, this. So we've got woods on all sides of the valley, a nice brook that runs through the bottom part of the valley, and the brook actually has some lovely wild brown trout in, and you can fish that through the trout season just on your day ticket. You really need a 6-foot rod and a pair of chest waders because there's some deeper pools in there, and it's great fun working your way up that brook. You can see a couple of little dimples in the water as the trout have swirled to take a midge. Right, just put another cast in. That has just blown in towards the bank, so I'll just drop another cast out. Oh, it's a big fin. So when it does get really cold, and if you come out fishing these small pools, however you decide to fish, you're probably going to want to fish with quite a static fly. There's a few ways of doing it. This is one. So fishing a wet fly hanging underneath the dry, effectively, and that allows you to drift the fly without having to retrieve. If the fish are flush on the bottom and they're not coming up for anything, then if you need to fish a static fly, oh, I had a take on the indicator fly there. It came up and swirled at it, and I thought it had taken it, so I struck in, but there was nothing at the end. It certainly came and had a look. That's great. What was I saying? If the fish are really on the bottom, the only real way of fishing with a static fly is to fish a very, very heavy sinking line, a very, very short leader, probably only 12 inches, with a foam flyer such as a booby, something that's going to float. And what happens there is that the sinking line lays down on the lake bed, and then because the fly is buoyant, it just pops up off the bottom. So the 12-inch leader just pops up and the fly kind of hovers above the lake bed. The only thing I would say about if you decide to fish that method is keep a very tight line, because you need to feel that take straight away to hook into the fish. I just dropped it out again. But I'd probably give it in a water like this 15-20 minutes. Move around a bit, put the fly over a few fish, and if I've not had a take on the dowel back by then, I'd look at probably changing it. And what I'm likely to do is go down in size. So I've got a size 14 on at the minute, which is, to be fair, quite big for this water. But I prefer to start big and go small. Right, let's put a longer cast out. There's a very icy wind starting to blow over the lake now. It's a time of year where you have to retreat to the car and put the heaters on every hour or two just to keep your hands warm enough. I hate fishing in gloves. I mean, sometimes you have to, especially on the river when you've got wet hands. Oh, I can't see the indicator now, the ripples have blown over it. Like I said, when you're on the river, I really got to wear neoprene gloves there for the grayling. But I don't like trying to cast a long way or put longer casts out with gloves. Very peaceful here. There's actually a mixture of lakes. There's 3 small trout pools, all regularly stocked. And then there's another, I think, 5 coarse fishing lakes. I think there's a specimen carp lake, and then there's some mixed fisheries, and then you've got the brook, and there's a cafe and car parks. It's quite a big complex, but not heavily fished, to be honest. I've walk down here. There's 2 other anglers in total. I mean, a lot of people don't know it's here. It's about 4 miles outside of Dronfield. Oh, we're in. Now that is a big fish, and it's taken the indicator fly on the surface. That absolutely walloped it. And I was fishing quite far out in the middle, so it's it took quite a big strike to lift the line and get it in. I just want to keep a tight line on this because it looks a decent fish. I want to make sure I'm hooked into it nicely, keep some tension on because I've got barbless hooks on. Let's try and get to the net. I'm about 15 feet away from my net on the bank, so just having to sidestep down the bank towards the net. This net's, I think, on its last journey out as well. It's about had it. I tend to get through 1 net a year at the minute. Unfortunately, it's like waders. Right, this is a decent fish. Come on, big fella. There we go. And I'll leave this in the water, unhook him in the water and slip him back. Off he goes. Off he goes. So it can be an advantage on these little smaller fisheries to be able to cast a longer way. A lot of people will look at a big water like a reservoir and think, oh, it's a big water that I need to do a big cast. Well, actually on those reservoirs, the main feature is the bank. So if you're going to bank fish, then you may only be casting, 15, 20 feet to get into fish. On these little pools that are fished reasonably heavily, the fish soon just shy away from fly lines, and they probably learn they're a little bit safer if they're feeding out in the centre. And often when there's a few people fishing, you'll see a band of fish kind of pottering around in the middle, which is a good, I don't know what it is, 50, 60 feet. So if you can put a 60-foot cast out and land it nicely, you can get into those fish that probably think they're a little bit safer. A few pheasants clucking and squawking in the woods. Of course, we're into the shooting season now. In fact, it's pheasant for us at the weekend for dinner. Bang it in the slow cooker. The other way, of course, to fish a static fly is to use an indicator, such as a thingy-mabobber or a twist on a snap-on indicator of some description, something that is buoyant. But I've always been on the opinion, I've got no problem with people that use them. But I've always been of the thought, well, why use an indicator when you can use a fly? Fish a duo, and it's amazing how many times the fish will rise to that big foam or big bushy dry that you're using as an indicator on the surface. And you're just doubling your chances, really. And of course, if you've just got a plain old indicator on, then you've got no chance of catching a fish on it. And you will get fish rise to them as well. I've seen it happen many times when people fish with a bright orange indicator with a buzzer or something hanging underneath. And the fish come up and take the indicator. Right, I think I'll just I'll move a little bit. I'll just head down into the corner a touch where the wind's been blowing. Hopefully it's been blowing some of this food down into the corner of the pool, and there'll be a few fish down here feeding on midges. It's a cracking day to be out. I do enjoy winter fly fishing. I mean, I only really fish these small pools during winter. It's not really my thing. I much prefer to be on the rivers, as you know. But I know a lot of people enjoy coming out here, and I'm coaching out here all the time and on the lake. So again, short cast to start off with, and this time the wind is just going to take the flies round into the corner of the pool, and hopefully there's fish there feeding on the midge pupa and things that are being blown into the corner of the pool as well. So see if we encounter one. And what I'm doing is sidestepping down the bank as the wind's blowing, so I'm not getting a bow in my line, and the fly is just travelling naturally, and you're almost getting a drift really, as you would do in a boat. And it's a tactic I've employed a lot on still waters when fishing dries, when you're fishing with a bit of wind, because you don't want to be continually recasting, because the point of a dry fly really is it's sat drifting as a natural would be. And if you just sidestep with the wind and keep the fly in, then you need to keep recasting, and you're more likely obviously you're going to catch far more fish if your fly's in the water than if it's in the air. Right, I'll walk back up, recast it and drift it down again. Another couple of anglers arrived in the car. This cooler wind, there's a swirl at the old indicator again there. This cooler wind has put the fish down a little bit. There's not as many rising, but there was a bit of interest in the indicator midge pattern there. Oh, he's had a look at it. The fish has come up and he's hit it with his tail. He's slashed at it, the indicator midge. But I refrained from striking because I could see he'd not taken it in his mouth. So and it just bobbed under there as well. So it looks like he's having a look at the dowel back underneath, but not taking it. I said they can be shy at this time of year. They're not aggressively competing and snatching and chasing food. They're just slowing down now, and they're just happy to sip bits and bobs as they present themselves. Again, sidestepping down the bank and letting the flies work naturally in the breeze. A couple of little terriers pop their heads out the woods to say hello. I think we'll give this dowel back another 5 or 10 minutes. I've had one bit of interest in it, but maybe what we've been fishing now, 20 minutes, I would have expected a little bit more interest in the fly underneath at this time of year in these conditions. So maybe it's a little on the large side, but I'll give it another, I think we'll give it another 10 minutes or so and just see if we have any more interest. Right, back out with a shorter cast. The wind's just dropped off a touch now. It's looking round, the trees are all totally bare now. Every leaf has come off, so we're properly into winter. Some snow forecast. Oh, another look at the indicator pattern there. That's fantastic. What was I saying? Some snow forecast for the weekend. So we're properly into the first grips of winter. I'm getting quite a lot of interest in the indicator midge pattern, and what may be a good tactic here is to shorten the dropper to 12 inches, 10 inches, and the indicator midge pattern will attract the fish up, and then probably won't take it, but then hopefully they'll see the little buzzer or little dowel back and take that. So that might be a reasonable tactic to look at. Something I've done on the reservoirs before with a bright orange blob. I have a big bright orange blob and then a short dropper of 10 or 12 inches and then something like a little black and peacock spider. And you find the blob will attract the fish in, and then they'll see the little black spider and take that. Yes, once I've finished this drift, this little wander down the bank, I think we'll put on a smaller fly and maybe just reduce the dropper length. There's certainly fish are still up in the water feeding. There's no need to go down today. I've found over the years in this particular fishery that for me, when the fish are feeding on midges, small dial backs seem to work better than buzzers. I know everyone has their own preference. It was interesting, I was reading a Facebook post I think the other day saying what flies don't you get on with, and it's really interesting that some people don't seem to catch on certain flies and others do, and it just comes down to the confidence and where you fish and what you like using. I can't imagine the amount of fish I've caught on things like pheasant tail nymphs over the years, and yet there's people that won't use them because they just don't seem to catch on them. I think that's the beauty of fly fishing though, isn't it? It's so subjective about what you enjoy and what you want to do, and not getting hung up on what other people are doing so much. This fly pattern here that I'm using is a prototype actually, and it's working beautifully today, but it is going to be for sale on the website. I'm just going to head back up to the bag, and it looks cracking. It's a cracking fly. I'm going to head back up to the bag and I'm going to just put a smaller dowel back on and just shorten this dropper length a touch, and we'll see if that makes a difference. Right, so I've shortened the dropper by about 10 inches, so it's probably 12 inches in total now. And I've gone down to a size 16 dowel back. And we'll drop this in and we'll see if it makes a difference. A few walkers just coming behind me. Doing my best not to take their hats off. Right, so we're casting again, only a short cast, 10-15 feet. And again, just sidestepping down the side of the water, working the fly with the ripple. No one else is fishing this pool. I think there's about 5 or 6 anglers now, but they're all crowded around the next pool up. Maybe they know something I don't. It's just on the right side of cold at the minute. It's fairly dry, it feels a dry day, so hands aren't too bad. But when the wind gets up, it really does chill you to the bones. Now there's a bit of a swirl again near the indicator midge there. I think I'll make this the last drift in this corner. I'm going to try my fortunes just further up the bank, move around a bit, maybe put some longer casts out and try and hit a few of these fish that are in the middle, although it's certainly gone a bit quieter since the cooler winds got up. Work my way out, fish the water a bit further out from here, and then I'll wander back up. When we get a gust of wind, we're getting all those little vortexes on the water. I remember when I was a kid, I used to think they were fish. I used to get really excited at the lake. There's fish everywhere, there's fish. And it was only when I got older I realised it was just the wind. There's a very big swirl there over in the corner of the pool, and I suspect that was a carp. There's one or two in here, some big ones actually. I hooked one earlier this year. Didn't manage to land it. It threw the hook, but just occasionally they'll have a rush of blood to the head and take your fly. The smaller ones will take them through late spring normally. You catch them about half a pound, little commons in here. You'll catch quite a few of those on a nymph. But just occasionally one of the big 10-15 pounders has a rush of blood to the head and grabs it. Which is always interesting when you've got a 5-weight rod and 3-pound leader on. Right, I think we'll have a bit of a move back to where we started. Right, back to where we started and just dropped a short cast out. There's one of those awkward ripples on the water where a very fine ripple, and it means it's... Hello there, little dog come to see me. There's a very fine ripple. It's just one of those ripples that's hard to see your fly. Can't really explain it. Anyone who fishes a dry fly will know what I mean, but there's certain ripples that you can see your fly nicely. Certain ripples that make it a bit harder. Well, we've had one nice fish so far and 3 or 4 bits of interest in the indicator midge pattern, and I think one little nibble on the dowel back underneath. So for what I've been fishing for now, half an hour or so, for a bit of winter's fly fishing, that's perfectly acceptable. There's 1 or 2 rising again now. Some high winds coming later today. I can just feel the front of them now. Trees are starting to blow a bit, and some gales for the next couple of days, and then some snow at the weekend. I'm meant to be out doing a bit of grayling at the weekend, so it'd be nice to get a bit of snow. I love grayling fishing in the snow in the river. Nice white banks and a bit of snow coming down and flask of hot soup, you can't beat it. Right, I'm going to drop this out a bit further. Just keep working it out from here. Oh, and the indicator disappeared, and I'll admit it, I was too slow. Too slow. Either that or it was not properly taking it, but I think the fish won that one, to be honest. I've been distracted by some fish rising over the other bank, and I just glanced over, and my peripheral vision, the indicator went down, the indicator fly went under, and by the time it had registered in the brain, it was too late. I need to go for a can of Red Bull and sharpen up. So these flies I've designed and specifically for this kind of fishing. It's for reservoirs as well, really. I wanted a pattern where a big buoyant pattern to fish reservoirs. You know, when it's windy and choppy, and you want something that's really going to stand out. But I wanted something, the actual fly part, to be quite delicate and midge-like. So we've got a very big foam post on the top of the fly, and then quite a delicate midge-type pattern underneath. And then the ring on the rear of the hook obviously makes it super easy to attach the dropper, especially in these conditions now. When you've got cold fingers and you're trying to tie onto the shank of the hook with cold fingers, and it's slipping off all the time. I know there's other ways to do it. If you tie flies yourself, you can tie the fly with a mono loop or a piece of mono down the fly. You can tie onto the shank of the hook, and they're all good ways. There's no doubt about it. This is just an option for people who just want to make it a little easier to tie on that dropper quickly. And the idea with this, obviously, is we've got the little fly hanging underneath, and the flies I'd recommend hanging underneath is stuff like the dowel back, or little buzzers, or little pheasant tails, or little spiders even would do the job. Ah, missed it. Another take on the indicator midge. Well, I say take, there was a fish rose right at it. Whether it's actually taking it into its mouth is a different story, because I've had 4 or 5 of those now, and no fish connect But that's very common fishing these flies. You'll get the fish come and almost agitated with it, they're trying to sink it or slashing or snapping at it, but not actually taking it into the mouth. It's probably more of a, oh, and the indicator's gone down and we're in. Yes, that's just what we were after. I wonder if that's the same fish that had a slash at the dry. Another decent one anyway. Right, and bring this one in. It's smaller than the last one, but it's bloody scrappy, I'll tell you that much. And there she is in the net. Yeah, that's taking it fair and square. So as I was playing that, another angler came round just to see what I was fishing on, and I think there's 4 or 5 in the next pool up and not had a fish between them. But as I mentioned to him, he's no good. I think they're stripping lures and wet flies, and this time of year you've really got to get in on the midges here, and you've got to fish static. The fish don't want to chase, and if you just get a little buzzer or dial back on and fish very slow and static, they'll be there. Well, I'm done. I was hoping to wait for another fish, but hands are getting chilly now. I've had a couple of nice ones and had a few takes. The indicator midge pattern's working beautifully, so job's a good one. So thank you for listening. If you want any more information about fly fishing coaching, then please visit www.peaksflyfishing.com. To buy any flies, including this indicator midge pattern when it comes online, the website is shop.peaksflyfishing.com. Please like, please subscribe, leave any questions or feedback in the comments. Always lovely to hear from people. So thanks for listening, and Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy New Year. I'll be back with another podcast in January. Bye bye.